Welcome to Off-Chain Podcast with me, your host, Don Redden. Today, our guest is Matt Luongo, CEO of Thesis and founder of Threshold Networks. It's the only decentralized permissionless BTC bridge to DeFi. This has been a huge year for Bitcoin, massive evolution, and we're super excited to have Matt on the show to talk about all things BTC. Let's dive in. Why don't you tell us, how did you get started in Web3? What's your origin story? How did you come to be where you are now?
When I first got involved in the space, it wasn't called Web3. I was working on another startup, an edtech startup, as the CTO. And I knew that I wanted to be a founder right out of school. And I'd been looking for an opportunity. I was working on this edtech, but it didn't pay. Edtech is difficult for a whole variety of reasons. Neither me nor my co-founder understood the sales cycle or really who had money. And so we were building things, hoping investors would cover us, but we weren't really able to crack the economic nut. So as I was doing this, I did not have much money. We had a small accelerator check in the Northeast that we ended up moving out there for, but I had to make ends meet. So one of the things that I did was friends and family had given me just loads and loads of Starbucks cards, just gift cards, and I think I have enough here in this drawer to make rent. And I did. And instead of doing the completely normal thing, which would be to sell all those and to say, fantastic, I covered my rent for the month, ingenuity for the win. I instead said, well, this is cool. I wonder if I could buy all of my friends' Starbucks cards. And then I could start flipping them and take the spread. And so I did that for a little while. And then I found a local coffee shop that was interested in accepting Starbucks cards instead of cash. The idea was simple. You bring us your Starbucks cards, you get store credit. And then I would power the exchange, right? Because I think a lot of people would rather shop local, and it was just a trendy shop. So anyway, that went quite well. And I made some money flipping gift cards that way, where you would buy them at 60 cents on the dollar and sell them at 95. But my ed tech eventually wound down. There's a whole story. It kind of flamed out spectacularly or quietly, depending on your perspective, I guess. But for me, that flame out looked like, my dad dying of cancer, me having a 6-month hospital stay from a autoimmune disease, and then the whole thing just being out of money and us having to shut it down. My co-founder happened to do a lot of the hard shutdown. But after that all happened, I really, really didn't have money. And so I leaned back into this gift card thing. And I said, okay, well, what if I started buying gift cards from the public? So I put together a little site to do that. I made it quite easy, put a gift card number or whatever. I transfer the balance off. And and it exploded beyond what I had the capacity to even fund. So I started accidentally learning about fintechs here. I didn't have enough money to float. So I would buy from people, then I would need to pay them. But it's okay, well, now I need to sell, so how can we sell as quickly as possible? One of the issues that I ran into, though, and this was at the end of 2013, was I was deplatformed. So I originally was paying people with PayPal. And, this is before, today we have tons and tons and tons of online payment options. But back in 2013, we didn't. So at the beginning of 2014, I said, well, what could I do instead of PayPal? And Bitcoin was the answer. So that's how I initially got involved in the space. That business eventually, after a whole bunch of twists and turns, became Fold today, which is a Bitcoin-backed rewards card that still has a significant gift card component. But
what was PayPal's problem with what you were doing?
Well, they consider it gray finance, and they're right. I mean, if you can imagine, not that I was doing anything particularly shady, but, there are tons of, in the same way that low cap altcoins have tons of scammers, gift cards, people are trying to launder money. People are trying to rip you off. There's this term of art, if you're a scammer in the gift card community, called sewing. And it's where they will sell you a gift card and they'll immediately swipe the balance. So it'll look good and then you'll get it and then you're out of your cash, whatever you paid. there are people who are using stolen credit cards to buy gift cards. It's like this. It's very complicated, and gift cards really aren't good payment rails. And so, if you dive in as a business person, you have to deal with all that, and you either deal with that with a lot of trust, or you have to come up with like systems of fraud de-risking. And anyway, yeah. So it's a really actually, it's quite an introduction to even before crypto, just to consumer finance. Because you see all of the issues with rails. Like suddenly you're like, okay, how can I get this person who's selling me this thing from this particular country or state or whatever, and how can I be really confident that they are not going to follow their money back? And it turns out in the traditional finance system, that last bit is quite difficult.
Yeah, man. Okay, so if we just rewind that story a little bit. You are working on another startup, but you don't have a lot of money, and so you see you have a problem, rent. You have a potential solution, which is your gift cards, but that's, you can't necessarily pay your rent in gift cards, for example,
right?
At least not in 2013. And so you, in solving another problem of yours to potentially help another startup of yours, you actually accidentally, perhaps, or maybe on purpose.
No, it was an accident.
It's an accident. Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, fair enough. Okay, so you on accident. Because PayPal deplatformed you, you went looking, and were you aware of Bitcoin or blockchain before that time, or was this a brand new adventure for you?
No, I mean, I was I knew a lot of adjacent technology, so I was like a big Tor privacy proponent. I knew a lot about a lot of the tech that led to mesh networks and I knew Merkle trees from BitTorrent. But no, I'd always just I'd heard about Bitcoin, but it had never really broken through.
How much of it was the privacy component of Bitcoin, and how much of it was just the rails?
It was the rails. It was privacy. It's not private at all, and that was pretty apparent using it. It was just the ability it was just the fact that no one could tell me no. And I mean, I still had to use early on. I used Coinbase and various other on and off ramps, and those were all touch and go as well. But the nice thing about that is you just switch, right? There weren't a lot of options for USD at the time, at least, to switch. And so really, I mean, the lesson for me was just, you don't want to build. I mean, I'm sure the people who built on Twitter before the API got wrecked. And this was pre-Elon Musk, before they sort of rugged everyone with the API changes. Felt the same way. It's you build an entire business or an entire startup on something and you think it's solid, and then it's not. And I think that is one of the deeper, if not the deepest, premises behind what we're doing in this space. It's you want to build a solid foundation, and it can't be changed by caprice. It can't just be pulled out from under you. And really, if you're building your entire life and potentially providing for your family around something, you would hope that you could find that kind of bedrock. So yeah, I mean, I learned a lot from that. I didn't learn it all immediately. I was just oh, great, now I can make more money, and there's an old digital trends articles and stuff about this gift card swapping service, and later it became Fold. I don't even think I've fully written down that story anywhere, because Fold now is its own thing with its own CEO and its own destiny. But yeah, at the time it was just scrappy as hell, trying to scratch something. One of the things that I think it says about me, though, it's you're oh, you had to make rent. Okay, so you were a computer science trained software engineer, pretty decent coder at the time, at least. And it didn't occur to me that you could just work somewhere for 10 hours a week insulting, and you would never have any money. It was fine, And instead I'm no. Not only am I going to sell these gift cards, but why stop there? I'm going to come up with this, So it's just it's almost pathological for me. I'm interested in economic systems. I'm interested in how the world works. And, why solve your problem when you can solve your problem's problem, right? So I think that it kind of tells you how I work and how Thesis eventually came to be is,
Well, so speaking of Thesis,
yeah.
Do you consider yourself now? Do you mostly consider yourself a dev or a coder? Do you mostly consider yourself a Bitcoiner or a Bitcoin builder? Do you mostly consider yourself a startup founder and company builder? Do you mostly consider yourself somebody who helps other people make companies and build things, or is it just everything always at once?
These are hard questions. Yeah, I still identify, I guess, mostly as a builder. I think the things that I'm the most proud of are the things that I have put a lot of sweat into. But most of the things that I help people with, I put a lot of sweat into. So I'm getting to the point where I can be really excited for other people's success, be really excited to see. I mean, again, Fold turned into a business after this story. And eventually, it outgrew me. We hit this point in Bitcoin where it became very Bitcoin won't be used in the immediate term for payments. It's really about savings. And Will, who's the current CEO of Fold, he was all about that. He understood immediately. He had a background growing up in countries that had currencies debased. And he was like, yeah, this isn't about hacking around America's terrible payment rails. This is about providing people elsewhere with an investment and a savings opportunity that can't be rugged. And so I would say, I mean, he was the first example of me just being, I'm so proud of what the team has built. And I mean, I'm sure they're still running some code that I wrote, but it's not where I derived my, that's not what I'm proud of.
At all anymore with Fold?
Yeah. So with Fold, I'm on the board. And so in addition to board meetings, I usually meet with them maybe once every 2 weeks. It's really important to me to make sure in my relationships with these projects and with these founders that once they get past a certain point and they're not under my wing anymore, they should hear from me as much as is useful to them. And I think I have a lot of strong opinions on product and stuff like that, but a lot of the best people who run startups will have strong opinions on those things too. So I try not to use a lot of hard power, and I try to just be there to support. And if shit totally hits the fan, obviously things will change, and I'll get really deeply involved. But for the best operators, it's like I don't have to. I'm just another voice, and every once in a while I get to be uniquely helpful. So I guess what do I identify as? I still like to hack. I still, have I touched a lick of code this week? No. Do I make sure that I've got at least one GitHub repo that's just mine per quarter? Yeah, that's kind of the balance that I've got right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did Thesis come about then? What's the to Thesis?
Well, so Fold, I mean, it's a long story, but I can make it really short. Fold grew, and people knew it as an early Bitcoin company, and we built a lot of brand cachet. But there was at one point where it was just me. That's how bad that bear market got, where it was just me, my co-founder, who stepped out to earn some money. I was moonlighting, trying to make ends meet. I was the only one answering support tickets. And so you'll find people who now they run funds and they podcasts and this, that, and the other on Twitter. And they're like, oh, hey, Matt, I knew you from Fold support in 2016. So, it got dark. And when it became obvious, we were on the wrong side of the block size debate many times. And with with Segwit 2x, it sort of became obvious to me why we were on the wrong side. And I realized, no, I actually don't want Bitcoin to be controlled by a bunch of corporations, even if they're cool startups and even if I know the CEOs. I don't want that. And so at that point, I had this kind of break where, as a builder and an engineer, I said, okay, well, stuff I want to do on Bitcoin, economic consensus doesn't want me doing it there. But I still want to build things. So at that point, I started playing with Ethereum. I started looking at other chains, and my thought was, I'm still a Bitcoiner, but maybe I can build somewhere else. So that's what led to building Keep and tBTC, and realizing that, really, in this brave new world of DeFi and the greater Web3, I wanted Bitcoin to stay relevant, regardless of whether or not the Bitcoin network, is upgraded frequently. And that's at the point where I realized that we had something that was bigger than just Fold and bigger than just tBTC, because I kind of realized that, as a builder, it's not that I get bored. It's just that I can demonstrate 0 to 1, but then after that, I'm not the right person to run these things. And so that's what led to Thesis. I think we officially named it in 2019. And so Will started running Fold. He completely revamped it. It's a strong new vision. I ran Keep, and we built tBTC. We raised a bunch of money and launched that. But then after that, we kept going. So we launched another project called Saddle. Another one called Tahoe. Originally, it was Tally Hope, and the name has been improved, I think. And then since then, we've been incubating more stuff. Another project, Organel's project called Etcher. Another one called Embody that I think you've chatted with Anna. And yeah, so it just kind of became clear that we're not happy to work on one thing. And then we raised for the studio once we knew we had a line. It wasn't just 2 projects. We raised for the studio in 2021. So yeah, what do? We build. I think we're distilling this narrative right now, but we do 2 things. We build off of Bitcoin. So we do a lot of work in Ethereum. We do work with Solana. We do work in these chains that I think are incredibly neutral and interesting. But a lot of it is about how can we take either ideas or Bitcoin, the asset, and how can we expand them? Because, if I learned anything from Fold, Bitcoin isn't finished. It's not done. It's not done economically, right? It's not going to become irrelevant tomorrow at all. There's some people in the space who talk about the flipping, and I just kind of roll my eyes. But it's also not done technically. Just because the network is not getting many upgrades doesn't mean that we should stop building interesting things on top of Bitcoin as a base layer. And then the other thing that Thesis is working on is we're kind of building from this idea of, okay, Bitcoin isn't finished and we want to finish it. But we also just want to build a more free and just society. And I think for us, that means individual liberties. That means, not having your personal communication censored, not being spied on, when you use your navigation system. So it's it's a lot wider. Money is the root of a lot of it, but it's not all of it. And we call that freedom tech.
Okay, so what kinds of things are you doing as Thesis right now? What kinds of, how are you building off of Bitcoin? How are you taking those ideas and expanding on those at the moment? What does that look like practically? Is it people coming to you with ideas? Is it you having an idea like you've done multiple times before and then building it out and then launching it out? What does it look like?
It's a little bit of both. So our current structure, we're trying to avoid proof of Matt. That's our anti-pattern, right? It's just Matt had an idea, Matt thought this, Matt thought that. So there's a lot of stuff we'll do where it's okay, I got excited about something, and usually I find the issue working on something else. So for example, working on Tahoe, which is both a wallet and a game they announced recently, we realized that people needed transaction monitoring. They need to be able to more easily see what is it that I'm signing. And so that actually led to us starting another project where it was codenamed Koi, where every time you would sign, we would actually simulate transactions, and we would show you, what it is you're signing, and we put together a proof of concept in Tahoe. And that was an example of something that, yes, it was my idea, and actually I get to code, which is exciting, and I put together the proof of concept. But we left it. We left it, and we didn't keep working on it. And the reason was because I didn't have the right founder for it. And so what we've done since then, and by the way, if you're interested in a service like that, check out Blockade. They're doing great work. They've done good work with MetaMask and with some others. You can check out Blowfish. There are some cool people that are working in this space. But I think, my learning over the years is if I don't have someone like Will on Fold, all launching more things do is that it stretches me more and more, right? And so what we do now is people don't typically come to us with ideas. Sometimes, let me put that more accurately. People come to us with ideas. We aren't asking for ideas. What we're looking for are founders. We have plenty of ideas. Ideas are a dime a dozen. We know the space well. We have a large backlog. We're typically doing research on this backlog. What I'm interested in is I'm interested in founders who are undervalued. So I want people who are have a chip on their shoulder, or who there's a reason they don't found something by themselves. Maybe their startup just failed and they want to launch another startup, but it's not like financially possible for them. Maybe they have a family and they're not just some, Silicon Valley well-paid engineer who says, what if I start a startup? Like we're not really looking for those people. Those people have funders. Y Combinator exists. You do not need us. We're looking for people who are a bit of a diamond in the rough. And I would say that that's really what Thesis is about as a studio, is finding those people. And then we're like, hey, well, here's the 4 projects that we've got going internally. Here's how they're validated. And we'll do that with customers. We'll do it with investors, which they are most interested in.
So this story started with undervalued gift cards that you were looking to spread, and now you're looking for the undervalued founders and also looking at the spread. You've got it. You mentioned family as well. I know you have a family. Sounds like you are incredibly busy, and the person you're building a family with, also we've had her on the show, also very busy, finding great success as a founder herself.
She is.
How the heck do you do family as a founder who is also coding? What does it look like?
So funny thing. So I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and my 5-year-old, I kind of told you about rough days of Fold and like getting it through this chasm, right? So my 5-year-old was born on the same day as the big Bitfinex hack back in 2016, and I know that because as I was at the hospital attending to my partner, it was an easy labor, surprisingly. It was amazing. It was amazing to watch her in action. But as I was doing that, I was trying to not look at my phone because my entire net worth was on Bitfinex. And so not only did I get, the 42% haircut, all this is fairly public stuff. And this is what led to the Leo token. And, there's all sorts of, BitGo was implicated. And, but I was not only was my whole net worth on Bitfinex, but I was long. So I was leveraged long on Bitcoin. So it's like, okay, Bitfinex got hacked, which means I'm going to lose some money. And Bitcoin went down. And I was leveraged Bitcoin to buy more Bitcoin. So I went down, quite a bit more. So it was this huge lesson, right, for me, where obviously I'm not a trader. I mean, I've been in crypto long enough. Of course, I've dabbled and I have thoughts on all sorts of strategies, but it's just not it's not who I am. And I knew at that moment, I don't care. I mean, I do deeply know this is going to impact me in a few days, and there will probably be tears and frustration, and I'll have to look at everything. But it's my son's being born. And it was hard. And you know what else happened? I mean, we had a seed round that we'd finally put together after years of scraping, and that fell apart too. And so that Bitcoin jackknife killed the deal, because now, crypto investors, they know, most of them, they know, it's just a matter of time. But at the time, that's not where we were. In 2016, there were people who were coming in who would suddenly flee and be like, "Oh, this space is too crazy." And it's like, yeah, that's how you get upside. Of course, it's too crazy. But so actually, another lesson I learned from that, in addition to just figuring out how to make sure I balance priorities in my life, it's also one check stuck around in that seed round, and these are people who had committed to come in. And that one check is one of my favorite angels ever, right? It's like I will, he hits me up all the time, random questions, and it's like, it doesn't matter how big we get. I'm always going to pick up the phone for you, man, because you saved us. So yeah, so I guess my answer is, for a while I didn't balance it. And I especially for the first 2 years of my son's life, I didn't get enough time. My partner has, part of figuring this out after we had our first kid was we slowly realized that my partner has a premenstrual disorder that gets worse every child you have. And so with kid one, I was just like, well, I've never had a kid before, and she really loves it, and I really love it. Frankly, I love children, and I always knew I wanted to be a father. But with kid two, suddenly, like, the mood swings and the hormonal stuff became completely overwhelming. And yeah, it's very hard to balance against the startup. I think one of the things that's different about crypto, though, is that so much of it is liquid. So at this point, Bitcoin is. My average price for Bitcoin was something like $300, and so I think and that's luck. That's not repeatable. Don't take that as advice, but so thankfully, like, as all these things were happening and things were hard, and I kept grinding. Of course, I never bought enough. You never buy enough. That's like a truism, right? At least we had enough, though, enough that we could still live the startup life and the craziness, but remove the financial pressure. And I think that helped a bunch. I don't recommend having a startup. And actually, let me see. That's not true. I do recommend it, but you get to have two things if you're a startup founder. You get the startup and one other thing. It can be a hobby. Maybe you run marathons. Maybe you lift weights. It can be or it can be kids. And you don't really get a third thing. And so I think when I talk to founders, I've met, like, some really impressive people who their investors don't know they're pregnant, and they have had to keep that to themselves. And they're going to power through, and they're going to do something amazing. And I think it's really just, I just think that you have to know what you're signing up for a little bit, and be okay with it. So, yeah, no Pomodoro technique, no like time hacks for me. Just like pain and priorities, and being real about what you want in your life.
Well, yeah, priorities. It sounds like that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
Strikes me, though, that you're not just a startup founder, but you are starting up multiple companies and all the time. Yeah. Does that have a compounding effect, or is it, like I said before, you're just
sort of
finding the founders and finding the teams to kind of
it has a compounding effect in that, like, if you're a VC and you have a problem in your portfolio, every once in a while you'll have a problem across your portfolio. So, like, a standard VC is, okay, I raise a fund and I have about 20 shots. I have 20, so I think people called it bullet in a chamber, but now maybe we don't refer to guns unnecessarily. You've got like 20 shots, and you're like, okay, I'm going to write 20 checks out of this fund. Now, this has all changed. Paradigm and Dreesen, a lot of these bigger funds are now using different structures, and funds work differently, and now there are RIAs. There's a whole bunch of, like, VC insider baseball that we can talk about where that's different. But the basic idea is you have a portfolio, you have a fund, you deploy the capital, you deploy it in, like, about the same check sizes that you want, and then and then you provide value. And I said it with air quotes because some of the best investors I know punch so far above their weight. And some of the huge investors will have a platform team, and sometimes that platform team is very, very helpful to the portfolio, and sometimes it's not. But here's the big trick with VCs and with most investors that I've met is the buck still stops with the founder. And that is really hard for the founder. But that's the deal. The deal is, you get this money and you get this support, but the buck stops with you. And so it's interesting in our model is we haven't raised a fund. We do everything off our balance sheet. And the buck stops with the founder per project. But I'm still there, right? And I will swoop in and I will help. So I think probably the difference on the one hand is that I can get our portfolio companies to work together in a way that I don't think a lot of VCs can. I can provide shared services and shared resources for portfolio companies in a way that I know VCs can't, just because of how fund structures work. But there can be 5 emergencies, and yeah, my life's going to get a lot worse. I'm not going to get to sleep through those like you typically would as an investor. And that's not to denigrate the work they do. And I can definitely name names of like alternative like investors who will step in. But so I guess I would say my life gets crazier, but now that we have enough projects and that enough of them are run by experienced operators, it's I get to lean on the founders a lot more than I used to.
Yeah, it is amazing how like in the industry you hear people, or VCs specifically, saying we are value add, but then when actually push comes to shove, there's not much value add. It's kind of
not true.
The money.
It's not true. Yeah, it's not true. And again, I there are many counterexamples, and I don't.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Like to make a habit of naming, of like going negative with this stuff. But like if you look at, oftentimes the highest value add investors are angels. Now it's incredibly hard to know.
Yeah.
When they come in, if they're going to be or not, because on the same end, a lot of the most meddlesome, frustrating investors are angels too, right? So they're like, oh no, I know everything about this space. Let me show you. And it's like, whoa, I'm the operator here. So, I think you really do, especially in times like this. We no longer have zero interest rates, right? It's like suddenly, I told that story about my son being born and that round falling apart. Like you find out which investors are value add when something bad happens. Yeah. And then you really need to lean on the fact that if you're planning on being in this space for a long time, you don't forget, right? It's a long relationship with that investor, but it's also a long relationship with all the ones that didn't show up. And so I think, gosh, if you want to get nerdy, we've been talking about like human stuff, but if you like go into the game theory of it, it's there's the prisoner's dilemma, but then there's the repeated prisoner's dilemma. And the repeated prisoner's dilemma, people are a lot nicer, right? You have to be. And they're a lot nicer because, right? Exactly. Because, well, if I stab you once, the next time you're going to get me, and then clearly this devolves. But if we cooperate, there's positive sum continuously. And then what happens is you see people's true colors when the game is over, right? So it repeats and repeats and repeats, and then it's like maybe Uber's going public, or maybe there's some deal that's so big that it feels like it outweighs everything else. And I think that's when it goes from rational behavior to let's see what you're made of and what kind of human you are. Anyway, yeah, so I think about this stuff a lot. And I think one of the interesting things about crypto is that a lot of the structure that we've built around startups, like those insights aren't true anymore. So on the one hand,
in what sense?
Founders. Well, you have all these founders who don't think they have to put in a lot of time. They're like, oh yeah, I'll just launch a token, and they have, even if they say they don't, they have all these like economic expectations that are completely ludicrous. Where it's like, look, why are you in this space? Why are you in this space? Are you in this space for freedom? Are you in this space because you want to experiment with new governance models or economic models? Are you some sort of like weird crypto anarchist, but also radical leftist, and you're trying to find how to get across the political horseshoe? Those are good reasons to be in this space, because you want to experiment, or you want to make the world more just, or more like individually focused. Those are great reasons to be in this space. Really shitty reasons to be in any space, in my opinion, just to make money. If that's what you want to do, that's okay. I'm not against people making money, but like, just say that. You don't have to, you don't have to wear the flag or the jersey or whatever. And so I think one of the things that we've seen in this space, like every boom space will have scammers, but for us, you have this category of founder who I find abhorrent, who are just like, yeah, I love this early liquidity and I'm going to take it. And it's because they have found a way to dump on the public and on people who don't know better. And I mean, the counter to that obviously is like community ownership is great, and at least we can see that they're doing it on chain, and there's all this. But I think that there's just a lot of people who took advantage of the easy money, and I wish I could say that was over, but I don't expect that's going to be over. I think that
it's happened every cycle. It's happening.
It happens, and it's going to keep happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's on the one side, but then on the other side, you also have VCs and hedge funds, where it's like in 2017 and 2018, we saw VCs and hedge funds competing for deals. And then in the following bear market, founders realized why they probably shouldn't treat hedge funds as VCs, right? Because like hedge funds have capital calls, and they will just drop your stuff unless they're legally obligated to not. And that's just how the structure works. And then in the most recent cycle, we saw hedge funds and VCs combining into these RIAAs. But anyway, incentives rule everything around me. And so, founder behavior and VC behavior in our space is different. And what I love about this part of the cycle is all the nonsense is washed out, right? Like, yeah, we're starting to get bubbly again, but the people who are around are still mostly ideologues and people who want to be here for a decade or two, not for a single cycle get rich. So
yeah, assuming this, most recent bump is just a bump and not the start of the next bull run, what are you most excited about in terms of verticals, if you like, for building in bear times?
Yeah. So I will confess that even though I don't say it a lot, I'm a permabull, and every single day is the start of the next bull cycle for me.
Okay.
So I'll say that. Not investment advice.
Long enough. Then.
Yeah, exactly. Zoom out. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, eventually that can't continue to be true, but that's just how I have lived since end of 2013, and I plan on continuing to do that. Yes, I have 2 children now, so I guess I adjust my risk a little bit. But yeah, but that said, yeah, what do I think is interesting building right now? So I think we've got a few areas. So, earlier I mentioned, this idea that Bitcoin is finished, and I also mentioned this idea of freedom tech. So for me, I think our space can be the counterpoint to, to just the sort of like, I was explaining it to a coworker the other day, these like centralizing forces that just occur naturally, right? Because power laws, because of how nature works. So I guess how I think of it is I think of like this, the scales of decentralization is what I like to say. And on the side of like centralized power, and I mean like big centralized power, you have things like nuclear weapons, like that's the reification of the nation state. Like no one, these are incredibly expensive things to develop, and they give power to large collective groups. And then on the other side, to keep it to warfare for a second, you have things like like bio warfare, which is something that you can, not me, but someone can cook up in their garage, and there's this incredibly like asymmetric effect, right? Or like drones, right? Where it's like, you can just kind of mess around, and there's this huge counterbalance against these large forces. So that's talking about like warfare and governments, but then it's also like, well, a lot of like what we used to call big data and cloud stuff are centralizing forces, right? In today's paradigm, by the way, this is not it's not necessarily anti-AI, because I want to be clear, I actually initially had a machine learning background before I got into crypto, and I love it. But a lot of what today's large models are built on, it's like they require just tons of resources. And, those resources are exceedingly difficult for an individual to get access to, where it's like, it's enough data, and it's not just the compute, it's the labeling of the data sets and like actually having stuff to go in to build these new, I guess it's in vogue to call them AI models now. That was out of vogue for most of my career. So we have this centralizing force though, which is like, well, Google knows everything I do, and OpenAI has these huge data sets, and what's person to do against that. Like, if you, I have an Android phone to my chagrin, because I lightly value open source over some of the privacy promises that Apple gives. Mostly, I just don't like being stuck in the walled garden. But it's a listening device, it's a tracking device. People know my day-to-day schedule. They know where I and my kids sleep. They know, and all of this. All of this is benign until it's not. And so I think the constant thing that you can mine in crypto, and we can say Web3, I refuse to say blockchain, I skip that, is we need a counterbalance, we need a counterforce to that, because convenience has led to us giving big tech so much control over our lives. And, look, benevolent dictatorship doesn't feel like dictatorship, right? But these multinationals are able to challenge governments, and they're able to, not just lobby, but really change policy. And it's like, there's not where's the force for small? Where's the force for individuals? Where's the force for, where's the counterforce? So I think that the best parts of Web3 and the best parts of crypto, and really what Bitcoin is about, it's about saying no to those huge forces, right? For Bitcoin on the money side, you're saying no to the Fed, but you're also saying no to seizure, and you're saying no to a financial system where there's 30 bankers, and I don't mean this in an insidious way. I actually just mean people processing wires and ACH and whatnot who can stop what you're trying to do with your money, right? It doesn't feel like your money anymore when they do it. And so, I've heard Bitcoin called the ultimate FU money, and it's like, yeah, well, no, I don't want you to. I am sending this here, and you can't stop me. So when people say, what should they start in this space? Please don't try to start another Bitcoin. What a waste, right? We have it. It's already here. But where else are people sacrificing, or, this like fake sacrifice of convenience, where they get convenience and they lose autonomy? And if we can build something alternative there, great. So for me, what does that mean? Well, some of it's clear. You've talked to Anna and you've heard about Embody. And I think some of it is, wellness, our personal data, our own health. In the States, women can't confidently plan their lives anymore. We don't know, and forgive me if I don't have it down pat like Anna does, so and you'll hear euphemisms from me, but what I mean is, at any point, if you're in a variety of states, you can be tracking your period and then realize you're pregnant, and you didn't mean to, and you need to get an abortion, and suddenly this whole domino effect can happen where it can end with you in jail. And that to me is abhorrent. So it's like, okay, well, in crypto, why aren't we trying to solve those problems? Yes, I want to make sure that you can take out a mortgage on your Bitcoin. Yes, I want to make sure that you can bridge from chain to chain. But also, these are just like basic rights that we have the power to fix right now. And so we should. So anyway, that's where I would suggest people go. Obviously, I can use the buzzwords. Like, I think decentralized social is interesting. I haven't seen many projects that are doing anything that needs to be decentralized, right? Like, just getting away from Elon and Twitter is like a pretty meh value prop. And I'd rather to see, I'd like to see something like Signal, where it's like only like hackers and activists use Signal until suddenly a whole new generation realized that they could protest, and they were all looking for an app. Oh, I've heard Signal is good. So I'd like to see more like that, and a little bit less, I don't know that we need another DeFi trading project. So
yeah, gotcha. So I'm hearing, obviously, the financial aspect of it is there, but you seem really passionate about the privacy aspect as well. And even as you're talking about like that centralization of data and knowledge and whatnot, just came to mind just reading about Amazon buying Ring and then Roomba so that they have they can get the floor plan of your house to be able to sell you stuff more, and they can see at your front door because you have to have a subscription. Well, you did have to have a subscription back in the day. And things like this. Absolutely, man. Privacy's got to be. I just don't hear people talking about privacy as much as I think about privacy. And so,
it's insidious. It's insidious because, like, what ring owner knows that the FTC has had to deal with engineers using rings to spy on women in their homes? Like, that's not something, I mean, it was in the news, but most people I know who have one don't know anything about it. And then even if they hear it, and even if they feel uncomfortable about that, like the cognitive dissonance, they're like, well, what's my alternative? And we need to be offering them alternatives. So I'm not, privacy is tough because until people have had a bad experience, they don't care about the historical stories that you tell them. But I think that we can be more private and we can offer better experiences. And that's where things start to get interesting, right? It's like, people aren't going to join our space because they're ideological like us. They're going to join our space because we gave them an alternative and they needed it. And maybe that's building something private and waiting for the balance of power to become obvious, people to move. Or maybe it's building something private or censorship resistant that just lets people do things they didn't feel like they could do before. And I think that the latter is more interesting as an investor. It's just more convincing to people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you even mentioned, I heard someone say today that they just don't hear people use the word blockchain anymore, or even crypto anymore. They're kind of out of vogue, out of fashion, although you unashamedly have used them all today. Web3 seems to be kind of that's the new one. But
that's going out of fashion too. That's, we'll see. I mean, I think all these things are about slightly different things, right? So, like, I think crypto, what I like about the term crypto is that it does make people kind of like crinkle their nose because there's something subversive about what we're doing. And if we lose the subversive thing, then why are we here? Like, Bitcoin ETF is cool. Like, I'm glad that more people will get access to Bitcoin, but it's also not cool because a lot of people will think they own Bitcoin and they'll own this like triple wrapped traditional financial instrument that can actually do damage to the underlying network, right? So like, so for me, that's not an advance in our space. Like, that's us moving closer and closer to like the end we want, but it's also moving us closer to, and we're captured. And so I think that things like the Bitcoin ETF and economic news around Bitcoin, I think it's really important for Bitcoin, but I think that the rest of the space can't just be that way. That's not success. If you're trying to replace a central bank, sure, I will confess, yes, that is a huge step in that direction. But yeah, so I like the term crypto because for some people it feels a little old, and for some people it feels a little uncomfortable or subversive, and I like that. I avoid the term blockchain because it's not an uncountable noun. What blockchain are you talking about? So I hate it as a grammarian. It just bugs me. But also, people said it so much during this private blockchain craze, and I mean, I think I said it then too, but I can confidently say now that's most of that's snake oil. Most of this like private consortium chain or private chain stuff, there wasn't a lot there, and public chains are far more valuable, and like value prop is there. And then Web3 finally. Here's what I love about Web3. I like the community ownership aspects. Like, it took me a long time as a Bitcoiner to understand this. I thought tokens are stupid. That was kind of like where I was at. I was, but it took me a while to understand that it is really cool that your users can own your software, like in a collective kind of different way than we had in the past. It's really cool that there are different economic models to fund open source. But if you look at the values of Web3, so it's like, accessibility and community ownership, there's still some things missing. So when you say Web3, people don't think privacy. They don't think taking on the man. They think on the positive side, maybe a group of their friends in a shared communal ownership structure. And on the negative side, they think either grifters or or maybe a decentralized casino. And so I try to turn crypto. I use Web3 in some circles, but I think what we're really building is, we need to build freedom tech, and it's like whatever label will help drive that home is what I'm happy to use.
Yeah, man. You've mentioned a bunch of times already, just recently, about blockchain, about Bitcoin, I should say, and building on or around Bitcoin. Can you, as far as I can remember, being in the space for coming up on maybe a decade, the composability on Bitcoin has been anathema to Bitcoin maxis, really, and, Bitcoiners, and you just called yourself a Bitcoiner. You also identified earlier that you feel like you've been on the wrong side of a couple of the disagreements over the years. Just wondering, is this still a controversial position to have, to be building on Bitcoin and not just Bitcoin is the show?
Yeah. So it is the ordinals. So first, let me state, I'm not an NFT person. It's not because I'm against NFTs. It's like the collecting behavior that I think is like the positive part of NFTs, the trading behavior, but like the collecting behavior that I think is like really human. It's just, I'm not a collector. I'm a points person. I'm a total sucker for like a point system or something. Yeah. Like if you watch me, I just like, I hate what Delta does to me with their point system, even though I know I should know better. But I don't, I don't collect baseball cards. I don't collect, I don't collect NFTs. That said, what I love about ordinals is that there was this resurgence in interest in Bitcoin, the technology, which, we write script. We still, we still do that work, but a lot of people don't, frankly. And it was the first time that I had seen Ethereum aligned people that I only met in the Ethereum space that I know are primarily focused there, start running Bitcoin nodes. And that for me was not a wake-up call, but just like a shot fired. Like it was time to pay attention. So I think that there's this building resurgence and building on Bitcoin as technology, and not just money. And it's been, I won't lie, it's been really nice because I'm getting DMs from people who have, laughed at our work for years. They're like, oh, holy, wow, you were ahead of the curve. And so obviously like that feels good and that's edifying. But what I think is interesting about Bitcoin is that if you introduce your family to our space, what they're probably going to experience is like, let's say they go on the Coinbase or Binance. Like, unfortunately, the first thing they're going to have to do is buy something. And there are some other on-ramps where you can earn, but mostly people buy. And maybe you're like, hey, you should buy some Bitcoin. You should take it off to a ledger. Here's how you use it. And you like give them the rundown. But then what happens is they go to buy Bitcoin and then they see 100 other assets. 1,000, whatever. Coin market cap, that amount of assets. And unfortunately, it is really hard to tell people which of those assets are of any value. Not just speculative value, but of any real value investing value. And it's much easier to just say, just look at Bitcoin. The second you say, well, ETH is okay. And actually Sol's pretty good, but it just went on a run, so I don't know if now's the time. Well, let me tell you about the scalability trilemma, and let me tell you about, when you start adding all this nuance, people, they have jobs, kids, lives, and it's a big ask. And so one of the things that I think is interesting about Bitcoin that I feel like my Ethereum and others from like tech crypto versus money crypto people misunderstand is that the second you open the floodgate to more, everything just becomes quite nihilistic and you kind of have lost the plot. So for me, Bitcoin still has made the most progress toward being money. And what I'm seeing is that Bitcoin, the network, had been pretty anemic, which eventually can hit Bitcoin, the asset, right? So for all trading, Bitcoin, the asset on exchanges, and the network doesn't have enough fees, and there's not a robust market. Eventually, this makes Bitcoin, the network, unstable, and the entire premise of permissionless money. It's like, we're great, we all have money, but we've reintroduced permission with all these exchanges and whatnot. Ethereum, on the other hand, you see on the one hand that the ETH as an asset has changed much, right? Moving from proof of work to proof of stake, introducing EIP 1559. These are huge economic changes, the likes of which would make, right? Like they're things that like a lot of Bitcoiners are in it because they want to save money. So the idea of what they're saving in, having these big economic changes is not great. But their block space is useful and people are bidding it up. People want to use it to trade and they want to use it to buy NFTs and they want to, and that's really valuable. And so I think Bitcoin has to have expensive block space for it to continue to grow relative to its price. And Ethereum may or may not, this is a decision for their community, want to go after moneyness, in which case the economic changes to the base asset stop. So I think, I guess the way that I look at it is I'm excited that people are more interested in building on Bitcoin, the tech and the network, because we need to see that block space go for a premium. And because I still think it has the best opportunity at moneyness. I think if a flippening ever happens, it's going to be really bad for the space as a whole. Like it might be really good for like ETH to BTC or whatever, Sol, I don't know, whatever does it. If it happens, it's obviously going to be good for that other asset. But I think for the whole space, now when you introduce people to the space, they're like, oh, what should I buy? And tell them, well, this is the number one. And you have this big story about smart contracts and the future of finance. And, in one year it was the world computer and another year it was, and I'm not like making fun of people who have spent their lives on this. I think all those narratives were valuable. It's just, it's not clean. It's not a clean story anymore. So I'm the most interested in a world where we can maintain Bitcoin's moneyness and we can also still have composability. So that's what tBTC is focused on. But you'll see a bunch of projects coming out of Thesis will kind of be vacillating between this, like Bitcoin as money, and then this kind of wider freedom tech idea.
So I don't think I've heard the word flippening in half a decade. So it's very interesting to hear that come.
Well, I mean, once it was said once, it's like I'm not going to forget, and I don't forget who was talking about it either. But yeah, I think a lot of people are taught a lesson over the last cycle. So.
Yeah. Well, you brought up an interesting point where you were saying about Ethereum, where the blocks are useful and they're filling up, but that's also provided the biggest challenge to Ethereum as well is the congestion, and that's
it's so popular. No one goes there anymore.
Yeah, right. Well, so hence the popularity of L2s and rollups and whatnot. Do you think that is? I know again, these are things that people the Bitcoin maxis have been railing against for as long as I've been in the space, at least.
Right.
Is that still something that is kind of off the table, do you think?
Yeah.
Are people starting to become more, with the capability of Bitcoin to try to utilize the network more?
I think the Overton window has shifted, right? So I think on the one hand, Bitcoiners, and by the way, I say Bitcoiners, I don't say Bitcoin maxis because honestly, most of these labels, we've done the user research, most of them don't mean anything.
Sure. So, I'm not using the pejoratively either. I'm just trying to.
Yeah. No. I know. Yeah. Of course. No. I just wanted to say out loud, like, there's this. We have a whole bunch of different ways to slice this group internally, and it's been interesting to see, like, there's a bunch of fairly wealthy, somewhat older people who hold Bitcoin who are, in some ways, like much deeper believers than your typical crypto Twitter Bitcoin maxi. And they're this huge silent force in the space. But anyway, so it's a whole podcast. I won't go further. But
sure. Which
I guess
those are the people who have so much locked up in, on chain, if you like, who might find it useful to be able to utilize some of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. They need access to their equity, right?
Yeah.
And everything else, I mean, the news they see is like, oh, Celsius and BlockFi. And so there's a huge gap for us, like a credibility gap to help people realize that they can use Bitcoin and it can be, safer than something like a BlockFi or like a Celsius.
What's the 60-second pitch for that?
Oh yeah, it's easy. Look, if you've been sitting on your Bitcoin for a decade, congrats, you haven't sold. But you should be able to get USD against that without selling. You should be able to get a mortgage. You should be able to live your life. And we're building the tech that solves that.
All right, that was like a 20-second pitch.
Yeah.
All right, well, so
yeah, no, I think it's obvious.
Yeah. I do as well. It strikes me as, I don't know, man. It makes me curious that it hasn't been a thing for as long as Bitcoin's been around, to be fair. If you're thinking about, we've spoken for about all of our time, but I do want to ask, what surprised you about 2023 in this space? And if you have any fearless predictions about Bitcoin for 2024, what might that be?
Yeah, sure. I thought the bear would be deeper and harder. And I'm not saying it's over, but it does feel like we're past the midpoint. I thought that there would be more washouts, right? We're still occasionally seeing like, an FTX or Terra related, where they kept their balance sheet going for a long time and then washed out. But I thought it would be worse. It's not as bad or as deep as I thought. And
although it has taken out a bunch of VCs and prototypes.
Yeah, good. Good. A lot of those people, I'm sure, were innocent, but also we need extinction level events for a healthy ecosystem, right?
Surely.
And obviously, it's my job to make sure I don't ever get caught in one, and my projects don't. So maybe I'll regret that one day, but I do think that it's healthy. But yeah, I think the thing that I'm the most excited about in 2024 is I think that there's this beautiful setup with ordinals and with the ETF buzz and all of these things to get a new group of people interested in Bitcoin. And when we have another wave of people who get interested, they won't have the same preconceptions. So we have this window where it's like, can we build a composable Bitcoin? And where new entrants, that's all they know, right? Is they know Bitcoin L1 and then a variety of L2s, and I don't get Lightning. It's not just Lightning.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's this just huge setup and opportunity that I want to take full advantage of.
Okay, awesome. Matt, if people want to hear more about the very many and various things that you're working on, how can they find you online or hear more about what you're working on?
Oh yeah, sure. Twitter or X, I haven't chosen my decentralized social alternative, so it's just MH Luongo. Or check us out at thesis.co, especially if you're interested in founding something or want to check out one of these projects.
Sounds great. I really, really appreciate your time today, and look forward to speaking again sometime in the future where we can compare notes and see how you went with those predictions.
You got it. Thanks for having me, Don.
Thanks for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Off Chain. We love bringing you great guests like Matt, and we hope that it's been very helpful for you today, talking about money, talking about technology, talking about the future and what BTC might look like going forward. Very, very interesting chat with Matt today. As always, like and subscribe, or better yet, share this episode with a friend to help us spread the word, and join us again next week for another exciting episode of Off Chain. Until then, take care.